Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 130. I'm delighted to welcome onto the podcast Neil Parsley. Neil, how are you?
Ben, really good. Thanks, mate. Thanks. Good to be in. I've seen some of the guests you've had on recently. I feel very humbled to be involved. So thanks for asking me to come on.
Not at all, mate. It's a pleasure to have you on. I know you got some great stuff to discuss that we're going to tackle in the podcast. But just start us off by, I've not mentioned your current role. So current role is physical preparation consultant to the FA, along with a few other things as well, which I'm sure you'll discuss in a second. But do you want to just take us back first, mate? Let's go back to your career so far, where you've been, what you've been up to.
Yeah. It's been a while. We'll do the quick version. It's I suppose started when I was really, S&C wise, while I was playing rugby league and sort of again like a lot of the guys S&C in the S&C world sort of I wouldn't say failed. I would like to have played a few more years pro, but I gave it a good go and I think I learned a lot. But off the back of that, when I was sort of 24, 25, I got my first role, if you like. I was working with England women's rugby. It was actually working for the English Institute of Sport as like a little part-time gig. That and working for the LTA were my first sort of stabs, and they were only part-time gigs. They were my first sort of things in the world of S&C, and that was 2001. So 20 years, and then from the sort of part-time stuff and trying to build a reputation, I got there was a part-time job up in Manchester at the AS, English Institute of Sport. So I started there just I think between 2001, 2002, and then very, very lucky to do 10 brilliant years at the AS. And that's really where I learned so much off so many great people. Mark Simpson was sort of my boss, was the lead in Manchester at the time. And he was experienced as an S&C coach already, and still is a very good practitioner and a good mate. So I learned a lot of the whole network of the IS back in that day. Was just brilliant. It was so open. It was the institute started pretty much that 2002 with the different hubs, like Loughborough. Where else was there? There was one down south I think there's one in London. There was a badminton one. I think Milton Keynes. There was one. Where else was there? There's a couple of others. There's one up in the northeast. So yes, it was brilliant because everyone was so open, and we were all sort of, there was obviously certain sports depending where you were in the country, like British cycling obviously had the hub in Manchester, so that we'd lead on cycling, disability. I led on disability swimming, wrestling, but then you'd have other athletes around the network. So you'd be sort of, other people would be programming your athletes, and we'd be all sort of coordinating networks, which meant actually you'd be phoning up, speaking to the other guys, and discussing programs very, very openly, and we get together a lot, which is something that the FA do really well now. They sort of just getting people together and putting days on, and the AS did this brilliantly. So the lead back in the day was Ralph Brandon. Before that, I'm trying to think who the original national lead was. Probably should know that really. Anyway, Raf was brilliant once he took over, and really encouraged that. We had a conference every year for all the disciplines, but I think it was just a brilliant time, Ben, that I learned so much as I was doing, being honest. On the job, you can't. It's brilliant when you've got so many great practitioners around you and we were all open with each other, very much open. I could go and watch Aaron Singh do a session with his track and field athletes in Birmingham. Nick Grantham was over there, and I'd go down to Bath, over to Bisham Abbey. Tommy Ewell was in Sheffield. Sorry, he was in Sheffield at the time. It was just a brilliant time to be around the IS, and that really helped me with the foundation. You just need to be writing programs, multiple sports, get your foundation as good as you can, and then start to specialize. So that was 10 really, really good years, and I led disability swimming, first one, wrestling, and then taekwondo up from Beijing to London 2012. Post the IS, I actually left. We had 3 kids, and one of my children, I don't know, just needed a little bit more attention, a bit more loving care. And it was going to be a big job for my wife. We had like a little bit of a program to do with him. So I actually made the decision that I was going to become a consultant. After London, pretty much, I'd done 11 years driving from Liverpool to Manchester. And we needed to focus on my son. So thought, right, I've got my gym facility, and I think as a consultant, originally I thought, well, I think I went 0.5 at the IS with taekwondo, and was going to try and pick up a few other bits and bobs. And then Matt Parker, who was head of performance for England Rugby. There was a very small part-time job with England Rugby at the time, and that turned into to doing a lot of camps and becoming sort of a full-time member of staff leading up to the 2015 World Cup for 6 months. So that was like probably a bit of luck. I do think you make your own luck, but there's obviously sliding doors as well. So that was great. I did 3 years with England Rugby, and leading up to that World Cup. And then since then, I've gone to the dark side, mate. I've gone football mad, which is funny because football's in my family. My dad actually played to a good level. Well, he was actually at Liverpool as a schoolboy, played under Joe Paisley and that. So and Shankly. So back in the day, so he always wanted me to be a footballer. I hated the game back in the day. I was like, rugby's the one, Dad. Rugby's the one. Rugby or athletics. So for the last 6 years, really, my focus has really been trying to understand and develop my knowledge as a football sort of sports scientist S&C coach. Hopefully that wasn't too long.
No, not at all. I was gonna ask this a little bit further into the podcast, but I put out to get some questions in. I think this is timed quite nicely because Wayne Richardson sent a question in. I'm going to read it because I won't do it justice if I don't. But he basically said, he first of all, he said, you're one of the good guys in the world of football, which is always nice to hear. But he also, this is what he put. So he put, your work speaks for itself, but what advice would you give to a young Neil Parsley, knowing what you know now about football/culture, but also about family in terms of work-life balance?
Okay, that's cool. Wayne's a good guy. Wayne's one of the good guys too. I've seen him develop his career as well in Manchester. That's an interesting one, and I know what he's getting at there because the culture of football is so different to Olympic other professional sports. I don't know. From a culture perspective, I think sometimes for me going into different sports, this is the way I've always approached different sports. When I went to wrestling, it's a different sport. I was a rugby player, so there was a bit of a crossover. Going into football, I think you've got to try and gain respect. You've got to respect the sport to some degree and respect the culture. So you can't, it's all well and good saying, right, yeah, I'm going to come in with some different type of ideas. But I think that's something that I've done in my career. And, you can have them people who go in and say, look, you're doing it all wrong. We need to do it this way. That's not my approach. Even if I think there's stuff that we can change. So I think from that perspective, I wouldn't, the younger Neil Parsley, I don't think I'd change that much from what would any advice be. I think, again, respect culture. You've got to respect some culture, because if you do go in and try and not respect it, I think you lose the room a lot, and then you've got to be really strong and you've got to be really, really credible. So I think respecting the culture, and just trying to develop, try and stick to your principles. If you've got principles that have got you so far, there's a reason that you've done 15 years, or there's a reason you've done 5-10 years as a coach. And then just trying to get you improve your knowledge. That's what I mean. I'm speaking from personally here. I've learned a lot, and I'm still learning a lot about football. you know, a lot about football. I think the more you understand the sport, obviously, that's a given. But I think just understanding the nuances as well, you know, being able to speak to coaches, being able to speak to players, talking to them about games, talking to them about drills, talking to coaches about, you know, being curious. That's one of my things. I think you've got to be curious, and I think coaches respect that. People respect that in the industry. If you've come from, if you're not a football guy, and you are, but you're trying to, you know, you're trying your best. You know, you can try and do a few keepy uppies. You know, you practice that stupid things. But you know, I remember Mark Simpson. Funny good little story. He started playing basketball. We used to play a bit of basketball actually at the IS. He started getting a basketball off the front desk, and I'm thinking, why is he going out and just practicing his shooting? About 3 months later, he got a job in the NBA, and he knew that was coming. That's classic Mark Simpson. That's what I took from him. He's a lot more probably blue if you go the insight, the colors. He's very, you know, he's super organized. I'm not that blue. Anyone will tell you probably that's not one of my super strengths, sort of thing. But I learned from him that being organized and being prepared. So you know, I'm lucky. I've got a son who loves football. So I love practicing with him, and I'm trying to develop a little bit of a skill. So if a player kicks a ball to you and you can stop it or you can pass it back and you do some drills, that's important. Do you know what I mean? So for me, that's respecting the culture. I did the same in Taekwondo. I ended up going and having a bloody Taekwondo fight. I actually fought in the plumbing, whatever you call it, the amateur nationals. Brilliant. Or something. You know, but I think that's what it's about as a coach. You've got to. I throw myself into things. I do throw myself into things, and I think that's the way that practitioners, you know, the top practitioners do that, so they can speak the language. They can do as much as they can. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm never going to be a football guy who can, you know, do things that people who play football all life. But I like to think that I've upskilled myself as much as I can. I watch a lot of football now. I love listening to coaches. I love going to different environments. My job's, I'm very lucky that when I worked at Man City with the loan team, I was great. That was such a great job because I went to so many different clubs and was able to watch sessions, speak to coaches. So that was I think, yeah. So coming back to Wayne's question, I think, yeah, just upskilling yourself as much as you can. Because that's what, at the end of the day, that's how you get respect, isn't it? Someone thinks you've got knowledge. If you think you've got knowledge, you carry yourself well. Don't do anything stupid. You know, don't be the guy who not blends in, but you don't want to be the guy who's, you know, doing daft things when there's in a meeting or when the training's going on. That's emotional intelligence. That's a big thing. I'm sure we'll speak about that later when we talk about other stuff. But that's a big thing as a coach to know when to blend in, to know when to challenge, to know when to, you know, because you've got to stand up for yourself as well. You can't be one of them guys who just goes along with everything, because that's not going to get you respect. Yeah. So I think, you know, all of these things I've spoke about, I definitely wasn't. I'm not the finished article, and I'm learning all the time. But I think all of these little things that if I could have done better early on, that would be great. But I'm continually trying to do them better by challenging at the right time. I think, you know, I was in Belgium a couple of weeks ago working in a club, and, you know, try and challenge the coach. And I could see him when I'm challenging him over a drill. You know, said, just want to ask about that drill you did. Can I maybe just, you know, ask why you did this? And I was looking at the GPS numbers, and I'm looking at it with my eyes. So I checked the GPS, and I think maybe, you know, what are you trying to get out of it? And we had a really good discussion. So I think that's where you gain respect, and that's where you're standing in the sport. At the end of the day, it's a small world sport, isn't it? Everyone knows everyone. And we're all you've all got your reputation. So, you know, and you can't do things right all the time, but as much as you can. I think the more experience you get, hopefully, the more things you call right, the less things you get wrong. You know, your reputation improves, and doors keep opening, sort of thing.
And being impactful. Yeah, definitely. I was just going to add to it, like, being impactful as a coach and going into these new environments, like you said, it's so important that we do respect the culture and we build those relationships, isn't it, with other coaches. But in terms of like, because there's a lot of coaches that will go into environments and cultures, and they will go in and just try and throw everything at it straight away and make a real impact in a short space of time, which in the modern world, with all these changes in jobs and coaches moving around from different clubs to clubs, you can kind of understand it. But at the same time, it's so important, the stuff that you've talked about there, isn't it? So I was gonna ask about making an impact, coaches making an impact, but I'm more thinking about coaches that are probably less experienced, that are going to go into a role, and what are some of the key things that you think that they need to do to make an impact, but then at the same time keep that balance in terms of respecting the club, respecting the culture, the coaches and everyone involved?
Yeah, cool. A great question. So I can actually give a bit of a working example here. So 6 weeks ago, I was lucky to get a Manchester City bought a club in Belgium. So I said, right, okay, we need a sports scientist for 6 weeks. Can you go over and, get stuck in? We need you to help the coach out. The sports scientist left, etc., etc. Right, okay. So, right, going into a new team, new coaches. I want to make an impact, but I've got to, exactly what you've just said, Ben. You've got to get it right. You've got to get it right. I've got to go. I'm thinking, right, oh, this would be great. What can I do? I'll go over there. I'm going to suss it out for a couple of days, and then do I give it the full? I want to change everything. We're going 3 times a day. We're doing this in the warm-ups, and it's, you've got to do it with, you've got to really. This is where the emotional intelligence comes in, and this is where the Brett Bartholomew, his book about pretty much understanding that it's not all about the sets and reps. This is where the emotional intelligence, and this is where Nick Grantham put something about him. He did I forget what it was. Read something today. I thought that was brilliant. He worked somewhere a bit random when he was younger, in an office maybe, or you're going to use your experiences. I played a lot of golf when I was a young kid, and I think actually that really helped me, because my brother was turned professional golfer, so he was really good. I was terrible, but I sort of like, we were both there trying to play on a Saturday. The only way you can play on a Saturday is to get a senior handicap, and the only way to get a senior handicap is play competitions with other members. So you're playing literally with a surgeon. You've got an array of people, generally all 2-3 times your age. I'm 14, 15, and you've got 4 hours and you've got to speak to these people. Yeah. So I think that, and I'm not saying I'm the most emotionally intelligent person in the world, but I think that really that sort of really helped me, because I had to think about questions, had to answer questions, not being stupid, because you've got 4 hours with these people. You've got your reputation in the golf club. So I think it's a really, maybe a daft example, but I think you've got to have that emotional intelligence, and that's huge going in to make an impact. You've got to know, does the impact go bang, as you say, or I think I like to, when I was there in Belgium, I've gone, right, okay, first few days, let's go with the structure that the old guy put in place. Yeah. I'm gonna go with the timetable for probably the first week. I'm only there 6 weeks, but I think I can do the first week. Let's look at the timetable. Let's look where he's got his gym sessions. Let's look what he does for his warm-ups, speak to the other coaches. I was in quarantine, so I actually was great. It was great speaking to the physio and the other coaches, right? What's gone on? Because again, you can't not ask that question. You've got to ask the question of what's been going on, because there might be some brilliant stuff or stuff that the coach absolutely loves. So by asking them questions, the coach said, yeah, I always liked the warm-up to finish with the ball. Yeah. Because then I feel like I can go into my possession drill and they've had the foot on the ball. So that was just from asking questions. That was me asking questions, doing my due diligence. So I would say, to make an impact, make sure you do some good due diligence with the environment you're going into. If you can go and observe, go and see what's going on. And then you might go, right, okay, well, the gym floor is like an ice rink. So I can't be doing all the things that maybe I'll want to do in the gym session. I'm gonna have to take my dynamic gym stuff outside. Yeah. So these are all things that, again, I had to deal with. But I think that initial impact that you just said, it is really, really important to get to plan it out. And I'm thinking, right, if I go in, and then I even thought about, right, what's my first session like? How do I want to be? How am I going to introduce myself to the players? How do I, that literally, these are all things that you've got to prepare yourself for. And I think over preparation, in my head, is Mark Simpson in my head, my first sort of like second first mentor. He over prepared everything, and that was a real good example for me. So going into any new situation with a new athlete, make sure you're prepared, know what you're going to do. If you can observe, if you know, find out what's gone on before, that is massive. That is huge. You cannot just throw everything out the window. You know, I think that's really, really dangerous. And if there has been a load of stuff going on that you want to get rid of, you know, you can get rid of it, but you've got to know the people. Then the coaching staff, the sports science, medical staff, they're going to be a lot happier if you've got a better relationship with them. If you start sacking stuff off, because some of them people who are still in the club have probably put them things in place. So if you come in, actually, it was a good one. Match day warm up. So match day warm up. One of the players comes over to me after sort of 2 weeks, my first match day warm up for this game. Player comes over to me and says, Neil, we do obviously a possession within the warm up. I'd like to split it because we've been starting slow. So I think we should split it in two. And the last thing we do before the sort of last few sprints is go back to the possession. So I've gone, right, okay, this is the captain's said this to me. So I've said to the physio, right, what do you think about this? And he's gone, sounds makes sense. They want to fast. They've been starting poorly, makes sense. Speak to the coach. What's the coach say? Yeah, great. The coach, assistant coach. I actually made a mistake. The assistant coach was in quarantine. So I spoke to the assistant coaches who were there on the day, but actually missed the coach that was in quarantine. He was the guy who does the match day warm up and put it all together. So I thought, right, I've got to make sure I check off the physio, the head coach, the assistant coach, but the guy who wasn't going to be there, I didn't actually check it off with. So anyway, he comes back the following week and it went well. We won the game. So we've done this split possession. So I'm said to the captain, should we stick with it? And he's gone, yeah, I think we should stick with it. I've gone, great, we'll stick with it. This new assistant coach has come back in. He knew about it, but not enough. I didn't do enough. So in the warm up, when we're going to it, he was a bit, and I'm saying, I'm running it, Peter, it's fine. And it was a little bit awkward. And, you know, when you look back, and then luckily I'd built up a good relationship with him with lots of other stuff.
Yeah.
So when I said to him that night, Peter, I dropped the ball. I didn't consult you about that warm up fully. I'd spoken to everyone else but you, and I laughed about it with the head coach as well. I said, flipping, I've dropped a bit of a clanger here, haven't I? And then when I spoke to him, he said, it's not a problem. I said, well, it is for me because I don't want to come in and stamp on someone's, you know, you're stamping on some, you don't know how important things are to people, and you've got to be really, really aware of that. So yeah, it was a funny one, but again, it's just I missed that one a little bit. Tried to do as much as I could with everyone, but missed the guy who wasn't there, but he's the one who set it up. So I think it's just a good little example, and hopefully, if people are listening to this, you know, I'm sure they'll be smiling about times when they've not communicated or not done things. But I think for young practitioners, even for people who've been doing it a while, one, you can get things wrong, and you've got to just put your hands up. I put my hands up, said to him, Peter, I'm really sorry. Dutch guy as well, so you can imagine. I was thinking, oh, you could flip it and give it me. But he was cool. We built up in 2 weeks a good little rapport. And then, you know, yeah, and put your hand up if you make a mistake, but try not to make them mistakes, and plan and you know, plan things. Can't be getting well prepared.
I think there's huge takeaways in that. Not only the fact that you've said about making the mistake, but everything that came after that as well. Like the reaction to it is probably more important than the mistake in the first place, because we all do it, don't we? And the reaction and the sort of, the other thing that I find fascinating as well, speaking to coaches like yourself, people always pick out times in not necessarily the career, but just the life in general, where you talked about emotional intelligence, sort of soft skill development, and you've given the golf example. Loads of other coaches give it examples of working in bars, working in like cafes where they've had to speak to people. And I think that's so important as well, because then when we fast forward to this time and this happens, you've got the skills to be able to have that conversation, and it could be an awkward conversation, but you've got the skills because you've come across a lot of different personalities and people, haven't you?
Yeah, mate, it's so important. I mean, that is, again, you've like yourself got a gym facility, and I've got sort of 8-9 coaches, and there's a few of the guys young and they're so hungry to get into sport, and they, you know what I say to them, guys, you know, you on sets and reps, and you know, and some of the strength development work, and I see how much they read. I say, guy, trust me, you probably know more than I do, but trust me, it's not about the sets and reps all the time. And Brett does a great job in his book talking about that, doesn't he? You know, it really is down to, you cannot believe how often it's about the other stuff, about just being able to communicate with people, having a bit of a laugh with people, knowing when to try and have a laugh with people, knowing when not, knowing when you need to be serious, and being good at friendships, and maybe flexing your personality. And that all comes from, as you just said, that all comes from dealing with people. We're in the business of people. So you've got to, if you don't enjoy that, I joke with some people, and when I'm trying to, get people asking, can we have a chat and help me out with my, I'm right at university. And I'll be honest and say to people, if you prefer sitting on a computer and doing research, then maybe that's for you. There's loads of stuff out there that suits. Because if you don't enjoy having to deal with new people and conversations and like that, maybe that coaching, that interaction is not for you. And there's loads of people who are far better than me at data analysis and all that sort of stuff. That is definitely not my bag. So, if that was something that I was looking towards, I'd be saying to me, get away from that. Don't do that, because I can do it, but I'm much happier in a personal sort of role, obviously, which is coaching that we do. So yeah, it's so important that it's, doesn't matter what job you can do, just get out there and meet people. I always say to young coaches, just write programs for your family, write programs for anyone who does sport, anyone you can interact with, and practice the art of coaching with. The more you can do, the better.
Yeah,
the more you can do.
100%. I'll just make sure we cover the second bit of Wayne's question as well, which was
go on.
About work-life balance. And I think this is really important, because obviously, like you mentioned, you've got a family, and there'll be a lot of coaches out there that are either maybe starting a family, wanting to start a family, or have already got kids and a family. I think it's a really hard question, to be honest. So all the best.
This is a crazy topic, guy Nick Chad. Don't know if you've had him on. Great guy. Was the head of sports science for the Manchester City Academy. He's worked at the EIS. Real top guy. We had a massive conversation about this, because he's got 2 daughters, and I think they're about 3 and 5. And I remember we had our first child 2006. And then second came along, just literally Beijing. I was away in Beijing for luckily about a week. I got home and she had the baby. It's one of the biggest things. It's one of the toughest things, and that's why I'm a consultant. That is why I've become a consultant, because I set up the gym with Colin, my partner. One of the reasons was I saw the job. The world of performance is global. And I remember thinking, right, at BIS, things are going well. Want to try and move up the ladder, and thinking, wow, God, these jobs now. If you want to head a performance job, it could have to be in Australia, America, and I've got this family set up. I've got wife, 2 babies. She's got a local job, and I know you can take your family and move them, absolutely no problems. But at the time, we just sat down and said, right, if we start a facility, keep doing what I'm doing, but maybe having that anchor allows us to do other things and be able to come back and as a consultant. And that's what we did. And we planned it out, me and my wife, because there's a lot of pressure. The guys who work full time in clubs, it's a 6-day, 7-day a week job. It is full on. And, I wasn't willing to risk my family, being honest. Ben, I think it's a serious question, and I think people have got to respect it as well. People have got to really know what they're going into, because if you go and work full time with a program and you want to do everything you can, you've got to put yourself into it. It's not a 9 to 5. and it's definitely not a finish it, even if it was 9 to 5, or it's 10 till 7 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. We all still, and you're almost, if you're not reading, if you're not doing stuff, you feel like you're falling behind a little bit. But I think that's the way we're all very curious, and the body's the body, sport is sport. There's so much to learn. So we all do so much outside of them hours as it is. So I think it's a really interesting one to say. The way I dealt with it, to answer Wayne's question, was to become a consultant, and that's why I've sort of set myself up, and I'm lucky that I've got a really cool facility with great people, and I'm lucky that I get roles. I come across roles. You sort of you do one role, you do a really good job. Hopefully, it leads to other things. So I think there is that. The great thing is there is an option of the consultancy. It's not just the full-time job anymore. And I respect the guys who do the full-time jobs massively. But everyone's different, and it's great. I mean, it used to be in the fire brigade, there only used to be full-time jobs. My wife was one of the first female firefighters in Cheshire to have children, and she got a job share, so she works one day, one night, instead of 2 days, 2 nights. So things change. The world's changing, and S&C performance sports is exactly the same. 30 years ago, people didn't know what personal training was.
Yeah.
I think 10, 15 years ago, was there any consultants, S&C consultants? Probably not really. But there's more ways now to have a bit of consultancy. I think you've got to be humble, and I've in between consultancies, I'm coaching at the local school, doing for our foundation. I'm going out doing stuff for the foundation. I think that's where your humility comes in. If you are going to be a consultant, you might have to do things that you think, whoa, you can't be thinking, oh, wait there, I was working for England Rugby the other week, and now I'm coaching the under 12s. I've done that. I've literally done that. I've been on 6 Nations camp, come back, and then I'm with the under 12s at my local rugby club with my son. Or next week when I come back from the Euros, my son Alfie plays for Wilco, Norris Green, in the middle of Liverpool. I do their warm-ups. I'll do 20 minutes before their sessions on a Thursday night if I'm around. So I think to answer the question, it's been not easy. The work-life balance, I think it's very, very individual. Everyone's got different situations. How much do you commute? How many hours do you want to devote to your family? How many kids have you got? Is your wife easygoing? Is your wife want you there more? I think there's probably a book to be read on all the different things that you could answer to that question. What I would say is just there's a lot more options nowadays. I think with like yourself, God, you've got your facility, you've got your consultancies, you've got your podcast. There's lots of different options nowadays in this world, which is great. I think we've all learned a lot about Zoom as well. We've all learned a lot. We probably don't need to travel as much as we do, or we can be a bit clever with other stuff, with meetings. So, it's a real interesting question. I'm glad Wayne's brought it up, because I know he's got, family wise as well. It's a tricky one. It's a real tricky one, trying to get the balance, because like you've almost got to go, right, am I turning the tap on to my career? If I turn the tap on to my career, does that mean I've got to turn the tap down to my family? Yeah. Probably does a little bit. But then if you want to go, right, flipping heck, I've got wife's got 3 kids under 5. I can't really be turning the tap on to my career and that, because something's got to give, so it's blooming tough one, I've got to say. And I don't think enough people don't speak about it. And it'd be great to speak more about it with other people, because there might be other solutions that I've not thought of, that being a little bit clever with this and that. I say that's the consultancy for me, is you can sort of, obviously you're your own boss to some degree, but obviously some things come up, like I lost a fair bit of work last year, so a 6-week consultancy comes up overseas. Going to take it, because financially, it was a really nice little role as well. But it's an interesting one. I think it's a really interesting topic, Ben.
I do, and I don't think there's a specific answer to it. I think it's more of a discussion, isn't it, and an ongoing discussion. And like you say, getting people's different perspectives on it, I think, is really important, because hopefully people can take a little bit from different people on the approach they take. I'll tie in with the consultancy now as well, because I was going to ask about sort of private work with players, because you see it as a trend now, don't you? Especially the last probably 2-3 years, especially with social media and everything, you get a bit more of an insight into players and who they're working with.
Yeah.
Why do you think it is that players are seeking it more, or are they seeking it more, or is it just we're seeing it more, do you think?
Yeah, I think they are. I think I hate to say it, it's an American model a little bit. I think, like when you hear LeBron James spends $1 million a year on his team, I think people have started going, okay, well, you need to take a little bit of, if he's doing that, and the guys are earning the money that they are, can they have a team outside? I mean, the thing I want to say about this, Ben, is the people in the clubs, there is some super clever, super, organized, brilliant teams, and there's a lot of great practitioners within the club. So I don't feel bad when I say I feel bad. I feel that sometimes it's seen that, the consultants outside sometimes, don't do themselves any favors, maybe putting videos on and mentioning things. I think you've got to be really careful with that, because I think you've got to again be a bit humble and go, you know what, if someone's taking care of someone for 80% of the week, the training week, or 90%, I'm doing a few hours and I speak to them a bit, and I'm not trying to degrade what the consultant outside of the clubs do, but I think you've just got to respect what goes on within the clubs for me, because I know how much good work goes on within a club. But sometimes a player, to answer your question, sometimes a player just wants one-to-one.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just want that one-to-one. And, other times it might be they don't click with the sports scientist, strength conditioning coach, performance coach, whatever. So there's that. It comes down to sometimes they just want one-to-one. They get that little bit, they feel like they're getting, getting the balls tickled. Is that a bit wrong to say? But there's that side of it. I'm not saying that that's what all the consultants do, but you're just giving them, showing them a bit of love. You're showing them a bit of love. It could be all wrong. You're showing them love. Sorry, is a better way of putting it. You're showing them a bit of love, and you've got a bit more time. A guy who's got, in the clubs is the ratio 1-6, 1-7, 1-8 players. Tough for a practitioner to get that one-to-one time with every one of them players. So I think, let's be real now. It is here. There's more work for that. But I think, and again, the people in the clubs, the ideal way for it to work, and I've got this relationship with one club, is that you speak to the coach, S&C, sports scientist within the club. So what's going on. So then when you're doing something external with their players, because they're their players, not your player, they're their players, then that, for me, that's how it works great, because then there's communication. The load, as much as you think you want to know the load. If you don't speak to that person, you can speak to the player as much as you want, but you still don't understand what they're, what they've done in a week. So that's the way I prefer to work. If I'm working with a player externally, I love to have some kind of communication with the club. Doesn't that, some clubs don't like that. They don't want to do it that way. Then it's a tricky one. You just have to do what you can do, and then that comes down to a bit of experience and again, just knowing what players are doing. Obviously, asking a lot of questions. Asking a lot of questions is huge. Experience is massive, obviously, because you can't just be waded in with crazy programs, and you got to be so careful. But yeah, it's definitely something that's come more and more, and I think it is that one-to-one attention. I think individualization is key, and if unfortunately sometimes clubs can't give it, a lot of the time they are giving it, but the players just want that a little bit more individual attention.
Yeah, and again, that's been something common that's come up when I've asked a similar question to that. Essentially, they're individuals in a team sport, aren't they? They've still got to look after themselves.
They have, and they want to try and squeeze. They want to try and squeeze. The clever guys. They want to squeeze everything out of themselves. Yeah. So if they can have their own physio who just gives them a little bit more, or their own S&C coach, their own nutritionist, their own chef, all these little things, and they can afford them, and they think that it's going to help them. And let's not forget this bit, psychologically, confidence, that is massive. It's huge. So if someone speaks to someone, does a session, there's so many different things. There's shooting coaches out there, there's technical coaches, isn't there? There's so many different people. There's sleep coaches. For that player, if that gives them that confidence, psychological, that little edge, and they go and they play better for it. Well, you know what? I think that people in the clubs sometimes have got to go, well, because I know, I speak to some of the guys in the clubs and they're going, you know what? I think if it's done properly, we get it. Some people say don't like it, but I think the clubs have got to come to terms. I know NBA. I speak to Mark about the NBA in America, and they've all got their own sort of PTs and stuff like that. And he says, it's just that's the thing. We try and communicate as much as we can, and we know it goes on, and that it's just that is it happens.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's accepting that, isn't it? Because the more we fight it, it's not going away. Like, there's more players that are going to probably seek it. So it is a case of, from both sides, understanding both points of view, isn't it, and getting on with it.
Yeah, it is a tough one from the club. I think, again, comes back to what we just spoke about. Probably it's that having that emotional intelligence to respect the club, to respect the people in the club. It's their player, and they're with them 90% of the time. So you've got to do a really good job, if you can, on managing the team, managing. If you're going to try and be part of that team to some degree, people would laugh at that and say, well, there's no chance they're part of the team. But if you're going to be part of that sort of, all right, there's a team outside of the main team. You've still got to try and have the comms and do the right thing. I think it's so important. It's a tricky subject. It is a very tricky subject because, as I say, it is going on more and more. I think that you've got to be very careful with, again, the social media. I've heard of this is not a dig at like technical coaches, but a guy scores a goal. This is someone telling me this at a club. The club working hard with the player. He's got an external coach who's helping him with shooting. He scores a goal. The guy's all over social media. Yes, we've been practicing that for weeks. And it's like, got to be very careful with that. For me, it's like, again, that's just have a bit of humility about things and do the right thing. So
yeah,
it's an interesting one though, Ben. It's an interesting one.
It certainly is. Yeah. Now, I'm wary of the time, mate, because I know you've got much more important chats than to talk to me. But so we'll just move it on. I just wanted to go on to some of the questions we asked at the end of every podcast. And I know you probably answered this somewhat, but there might be a few others that you've missed out. But I wanted to ask, who've been some of the biggest influences on your career so far?
Okay, that's a good one. The EIS guys, obviously, that, I hate to... there's so many names that I could, you can run through. Matthew Robinson, Jeremy Mood. I would just love to say any of the guys that work at the EIS, whether it was, to be fair, physios, analysts, all the different, there's physiologists. The group is huge. I learned probably something off basically every one of them because it was such a good group. Mark Simpson, obviously, very, very big. Guy called Jez Green, actually. He's not in football. He's a tennis SC. He was massive for me. He was like my first sort of mentor, if you like. So he was great. I'm really lucky. There's a guy called Lee Halftech. He's a physio. He lives by me now. I work with him at GB Taekwondo. He is super clever. Totally, one of the physios. It's like, it's generally about strength or sort of biomechanics. He's a really, really clever physio, and sort of I enjoy working with him. I've learned so much with him off him over the years. A guy called Danny Murphy is at Charlton. Then he'd be great for you to have on the podcast. He's the physio for the under 21s. He's a really, really cool guy. He was actually, so Gareth Bale's physio. I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying. But he's a top practitioner. Been around a long time, understands the game, understands so many cool things. So there's, God, I mean, there's just so many great influences nowadays. Yeah. I literally, you were so lucky that, back in the day, there was other than the people you spoke to, that was it. you know, and a couple of books. Now it's infinite how many people, you know, the guys over at Altis, I love looking at their stuff, you know. What's the guy's name? Canadian. Oh, I can't believe it. I was reading something from, there's obviously Stuart McMillan, and then there's a guy at the Canadian Institute. Oh my God, it's going to kill me. I'll remember it. But yeah, he's a really good strength coach. Name's gone off my head. But there's just so many great people out there. So from an influence point of view, you know, God, we are lucky. We're so lucky. You know, Mike Boyle was having a facility, seeing what he's doing. You can't sort of, it'd be rude not to mention him. But there's so many good people that I've worked with, and you know, coaches. You can't Stuart Lancaster worked in England. You know, now AD Boothroyd. Yeah. There's so many great coaches around the England setup. I'm actually, to be fair, mate, it'd be the guys at the FA. I've got to say, are, you know, super clever. What's going on at the FA nowadays? I really am standing on the shoulders of giants at the FA. You know, Bryce Kavanagh, Ben Rosenblatt, Martin Evans, and all the other guys and girls there. There's so many great, clever people. So they're that's like, so people always talk about past influences. So it's great nowadays, isn't it? We've got influences that you just current, and I'm still learning off all the time.
Yeah, 100%. No, that's class. What about your biggest strength as a practitioner?
God.
What would you say?
I don't know. This is good to ask other people, haven't you? But I don't know. Hopefully, I think maybe communication and, you know, hopefully a bit of emotional intelligence. I think that's such a big thing. You can never underestimate that side of coaching. So I think I've always the relationship with an athlete. This is what I've sort of, I suppose, sensed and been told, and that getting the athlete to understand what I'm trying to get them to do. So I think there's a real big thing about that education without being too educational, because you know, athletes don't want to feel like they're at school, but trying to simplify. Hopefully that maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's just simplifying things to athletes and coaches that makes them feel comfortable that I know what I'm doing, and, you know, and things go in the right way. So yeah, I think that's sort of like, you know, that's probably not as much, that's coaching, isn't it, rather than the actual nuts and bolts of S&C. But I think that's sort of that relationship of getting an athlete to understand what you want them to do. I think hopefully that's one of my strengths.
That's massive. Yeah, I think that's really important. What about any recent CPD that stands out for you? So not necessarily just courses, but it might be podcasts, webinars, research. Is there anything that sort of stands out recently?
Yeah, cool. I was lucky. The FA got Jonas Speedworks.
Jonas
had a day with Jonas, Damien Harper. Yeah. So he's super clever. Sort of call him me diesel god. So you know, he I think he's unearthing some really, really cool stuff about deceleration, braking mechanics, braking force, all that sort of stuff. So I think I had a day with Jonas, Damien, and Joffy from the IS. It was on sort of like sleep. That was an awesome day. That was one of them days you come back and go, I know nothing.
Yeah.
I am rubbish. I need to sort myself out. So yeah, that was pretty awesome, to be fair. As a CPD day, I think that was really cool. And actually, you know, I had a brilliant experience. My daughter last night she's a gymnast. She's 10. So I listened in on a Zoom. I sort of watched her. She does this really cool warm up that they put to music, and I love it. But then I just thought, you know what, I'll listen for about half an hour, and some of the coaching cues and some of the detail and the exercise. She's on a bar. She's doing handstands on the wall. She's doing some of the core stuff. And I actually, you know what, I actually thought, I've just had like a mini CPD there myself. No, so you can get CPD from so many different places again nowadays.
100%.
Well, that was a nice little one last night. I thought, you know what, there was a great coaching cue on pelvis. Wow, that is superb. That's sort of yeah. So that was like literally last night. But that day last year with the FA was very good. Them guys are top of the, the sort of like, I don't know, as someone called, the wizard of a certain speciality. He's, them guys are super cool in them areas.
Yeah, definitely. And then just finally, mate, what would you say is, and you might cover this already, but what would you say is like the most important trait, or one of the most important traits that you feel a coach should have to be impactful with their players?
Yeah, I think I'd come back to communication, being a good communicator, because without it, you can have literally the best program in the world. And if you cannot communicate it and let the player's got to buy in, they've got to understand it and then deliver it. So obviously that's where the coaching, there's a whole raft of the art of coaching. So it's getting them to, you've got to get the information, you've got to put it into the right program, make sure they understand it, and then help them deliver it to the best of their ability. So I think that sort of communication piece, I do think that's key. I mean, that's what, to be fair, I'm not very clever, and I've learned a lot as I go on. And that's what I think's helped me. That sort of buy-in of whether it's a coach or whether it's an athlete. I think that for me is, that's something I've hung my hat on a little bit. I say I definitely, there's thousands of coaches know a lot more than I do, but that's my thing, that I can sort of, make that relationship, do it quick, assimilate the words and what I want, simple terms. I think that's a massive thing. We've got to remember, these lads, these footballers, the girls, that they're not sports scientists.
Yeah.
The coaches, they're not sports scientists. They need things simple, in simple terms. So hopefully that's, I would say, if trying to develop that side as a coach, if you are reading books all about sets and reps, and don't get me wrong, it's important to know how things adapt, and your methodologies and stuff like that. I think I'm not saying it's not important, but the other side of the fence of the sort of soft skills, as you say, non-technical skills, I just think that is so important, because you've got to speak to people.
Yeah.
You've got to speak to people, and you've got to be able to carry yourself in the right way. And you say, we're all in meetings nowadays. There's so many meetings, and there's so many coaches meetings, and MDT meetings. You've got to know when the right time to speak, when the right time not to speak, when to listen. So I think that for me is huge.
Brilliant. Well, we'll wrap things up there, Neil. I really appreciate you coming on, mate. This has been absolutely class.
No, it's good to speak. Really enjoyed it.
Just finally, mate, do you want to, if anyone wants to follow you, like, where would you direct people? Would you say to follow on Twitter, Instagram, or a bit of both?
I suppose Instagram. I've got my own Instagrams, but to be honest, it's all about my family, really.
Yeah.
So there's probably not really much interest there. I'd go for the gym, Underground Training Station, UTS Gym on Instagram. I think that's, we like to try and put out, inspire, motivate, educate. That's our thing with the website. So I think there's hopefully some stuff on there. We'll try and obviously mix it up. It's for the members mainly, but we're always trying to do some really interesting stuff on there. So that's probably a good place to look.
Brilliant, mate. Well, really appreciate your time, and best of luck with the reopening as well. Hopefully.
Oh yeah.
12th of April, just around the corner.
Brilliant.
No, top man. Really appreciate it. We'll stay in touch. Thanks, Neil.
Thanks, Ben. Bye.
Take care, mate.